$20 million in 4 years?
20 million, 20,672,000, so it says in the newspaper.
How the hell did you do that?
So I already just told you I've got stuff to sell, right? And so, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, who thinks in the next 60 minutes, it's just possible, I might want to sell you something.
These are the same governments that are labeling somebody like Julian Assange as a terrorist.
Yes.
Or labeling John Snowden as a criminal
Well,
conspiracy.
what worries me about that whole terrorism thing, once you've got that label terrorist to anything, now you've got the camel's nose under the tent, because now you're an intellectual terrorist. Because there's new legislation in the world that says once it's called terrorism, all these different rules, all your private liberties disappear.
Before we begin, I'd like to give you some context to the video you're about to see. Many things are going to be censored out or cut out, and for a very good reason. Although the character you're about to see is a very intelligent, highly creative, and high-performing individual and entrepreneur, somebody that has done tens of millions of dollars in sales in just a few short years, it is also a person that has been involved in controversy in the past. And I don't want that history to contaminate what you get out of this podcast. At the end of the day, this podcast is designed to give you an insight into the minds of high-performing, high-earning individuals. And I hope that you get the most out of this podcast without delving too much into specific characters and identities. That being said, I'd like to state up front, we are not selling anything, we do not endorse anything, we do not affiliate with anybody throughout this podcast. So please enjoy the show and get the most out of it. So it's good to have you on the show.
It is.
So for guests that are watching this episode, we have here today a pretty special guest. I'll keep your story for you to sort of explain.
Oh boy,
later.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that sets you apart from anybody else that I've met in the past is I think you have an extremely powerful stage presence and ability to be able to influence on top of a stage.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
So I wanted to sort of get your story on your how is it that you were able to be so successful on stage? And for the listeners that are watching, just for a bit of background, this is a man that has sold, I think it was 20 million?
Yeah.
$20 million in 4 years?
20 million, 20,672,000, so it says in the newspaper.
Yeah, okay.
And 42 months.
So there you go, 20 million in 4 years, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And I bet a lot of people are going to be asking, how the hell did you do that?
Okay, well, there's some systems and processes, but what I need to do is take people back a little bit, okay?
Sure.
To give them some background. So we've got to remember, back when I was about 18 or 19, and I was selling life insurance door to door. I was knocking on life insurance door to door, right? Which is a funny story, because they used to say you would sell one life insurance policy for every 1,000 doors you knocked on, right? So if I do that, and I only had to knock on 1,000 doors, to speed it up, I used to get 2 broomstick handles and go down buildings knocking on 2 doors at a time, right? That would double the speed, right?
Yep.
To get things. Anyway, but I was really lucky because I met a guy who was going to write a book on the subject called body language. Now, I'm a teenager, and the only subject about body language anywhere in the world was Darwin's Book of Evolution or scientific journals. No one had ever written a book on the area called body language. So I started to learn about subliminal communications and subliminal science, which is the art of how you can influence people through the subconscious mind, where people just do what you'd like them to do, but they don't know why they do it, right? Now, body language was the start of that. Then I got into talk language, and I just got developed into the science. And because I was so young, I just absorbed it all, right? Now, those books sold millions of copies. So that kind of set me on a path to which I then did a bucket load of all sorts of things, right? So, but if we're going to jump ahead to what you just brought up about the speaking business, what I used to do in the speaking business was different from what everybody else does in the speaking business. And I always smile because I watch people, they put out a course for like $5,000 on how to speak from stage, how to make money from stage, right? And they're kind of always the same. You know, you come on, you give people a whole lot of facts, right? And at the end of the day, you kind of sort of want them to buy, and then you pile in a whole lot of bonuses and free gifts and all this stuff to really, and then tell people like there's only 3 left, right? Or something to create scarcity, right? That's basically the model. My model was always very different. What I do is, rather than speaking to people's conscious minds, people's conscious mind never makes a decision. It's just the secretary to the boss. The subconscious makes all decisions and gives an instruction to the conscious mind. So let's say I feel good about you. If I feel good about you, I tell my brain, hey, listen, suggest going out for lunch with Brian because he's a good guy. And then my conscious goes, hey, Brian, how about we have lunch later? Because of the feeling that my subconscious got. Do you understand? Okay, so really, when you're talking to the conscious mind, you're talking to the secretary, not to the boss. So everybody in the speaking game is always talking to people's brains and their conscious positioning statement. Mine was always subconscious, right? So I'll give you an example. What I know is that there are 11 reasons why people will not buy from you when you walk up on a stage, okay? They're scripts. They're just spiraling scripts. They're there. Mm-hmm. And one's like, I can't afford it. It's too expensive. Well, it won't work for me. What would my brother say? What would my dad say? And all these reasons why people will not buy. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Whereas most people going out and try to create massive value for people to buy, I take a different position. My position was, what if I tell stories that knock out the 11 subconscious reasons as to why people won't buy? Then they won't know why they do. They just buy. And I remember once I was invited by a promoter to go to a talk for 90 minutes. And at the end of the talk, everybody went up to buy my stuff. And I said to the promoter, I said, I'm sorry, I've obviously underpriced my stuff. I should have charged people more for it. He said, Rick, I don't think anybody in this room knows what they're buying, but they just want a part of whatever it is. Mm. So to give you a really good example of this so that people can nail it, I used to know that if you get women who go to any sort of talk by themselves, they have this thing built in, and this goes back through history, that they don't want to make a business decision without their husband or their partner being involved. Yep. So they'll actually say, look, I'd love to buy this product. It's fantastic. It's great, but my husband's not here. My boyfriend's not here. I need to go and speak to them. Do you understand? So how do you subliminally knock that out? That's one of the 11, right? Mm. So whereas somebody else might say, oh, well, I'll give you a 2-for-1 or a special price or whatever to try to get over that objection, you're better off if you went straight to the subconscious, which has already removed it. Mm. So I used to do like the Prada shoe story. And I used to talk about the power of women on the stage. Had nothing to do with the subject, power of women, and how, like, ladies, hands up if you're a woman in the room. And half the women will put their hands up, all women, right? I say, look, I'll tell you a story. Just imagine one day you're going down the street on the way to work and you go past the Prada store. Now, ladies, do you know what Prada shoes are? Who knows what Prada shoes are? All the women put their hands up. And who would agree they're probably the most expensive shoes you can buy? They would put their hands up. Well, just imagine you're going down one day and you see this pair of Prada shoes and you're thinking, oh, my God, they're beautiful shoes. If only I could afford them because they're so expensive. And the lady looks at the window, looks at you, and you look at her and you smile, you keep going to work, but you're thinking about the Prada shoes. The next day you go down there, you've told your girlfriends about the Prada shoes you can't afford to buy, but how great they would look with that new outfit that you've just brought. And so the next day the lady looks at you and you wave at her, she waves at you, and then she sort of says, come inside. You go, no, I can't afford it, right? Day 3, you go and buy. You haven't slept for 2 nights because all you think is about the Prada shoes. Today, as you walk past, it's your 3rd day going to work. You look at the lady and she taps on the window and she gets a little bit of paper and she sticks it up and she says, for you, these shoes, half price. Now, ladies, you have to make a decision. Do you now go back to your husband to see if you can get permission and let him study and do some scientific research on the price of Prada shoes? Or are you just going, I want them puppies. You're just going to go in there, you're going to grab them puppies and figure out what you're going to say to him later. Mm. And they all go, yeah, we're just going to grab those shoes and we'll figure out what to say to him later. Well, I've just knocked out that whole objection about needing the man's permission to buy at the back of the room, because they'll all come to the room and go, I'm a Prada shoes girl. Who cares about here? There's my American Express. Give me that $6,000. You with me? So there were all these stories they used to use, which were very entertaining, but they were actually deliberate. So they were designed by, at the end of a talk, people would try to be, their brains thinking, well, there's no reason why they wouldn't want to buy. Do you understand? And they were all these subliminal stories, and they all had a reason for being there. And a couple of the other things I used to do, if we understand that whenever you go to a talk, could we agree that most times when you go to a talk, you know the person's going to want to sell you something, right? So you spend your whole time sitting there for 90 minutes thinking, okay, when's the upsell? When's the upsell? When's the upsell? So you're already thinking, you're not really listening to what the guy's saying. All you're thinking about is, when's he going to try to get you to buy something, right? Well, guess what? You might as well get out of the road right up front. So what I used to always walk on the stage, and I used to say, you know, it's funny, ladies and gentlemen, I'm walking in and I'm sorry I'm a couple of minutes later, but I ran into Brian. I was carrying a whole bunch of books and tapes and course of program, dropped them all over the floor, and he helped me pick them up, and it delayed me a couple of minutes, but I need to apologise. So I already just told you I've got stuff to sell, right? And so, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, who thinks in the next 60 minutes, it's just possible, I might want to sell you something. Put your hands up. They all laugh. They all put their hands up, right?
Yes.
And then I say, and I also might want to sell you on the fact that you'll be the most successful person in blah, blah, blah. And you'll also be the most successful fact that you'll never argue with your wife again. And you'll also be the most successful thing that you'll get this and this and this and this. Ladies and gentlemen, now who wants to be sold? Everybody goes, yeah. Well, when they've just said, yeah, I want to be sold to this.
They've given you permission.
They've just given me permission, and they've just psychologically said, I'm happy to buy what he's selling, that he's told me up front he's going to give it to me in an hour and a half, right? And sometimes I used to say, now I know what you're thinking right now, we're an hour way through, and you're just waiting for when I'm going to give you the goodies. Ladies and gentlemen, you just have to wait another 15 minutes. So I used to have a bit of fun with it. So I made the whole fun about the thing, but I told people at the head of the game, I'm here to sell you stuff. Do you know what I mean? Rather than keeping it under the doona. Do you know what I mean? I mean, let's face it, if you're going to have an extra girl in the bedroom, you might as well put her on top of the doona. So the thing is, I did that, and it was really, I remember once yeah. So anyway, that's how I did it,
And
right?
mind you, this was before the era of the internet, so it was still very much the old school way.
Yeah, and this was all part of subliminal science. And subliminal science is virtually speaking to people at a level below conscious awareness.
Yes, it's
right?
kind of like, don't think of a pink elephant.
There you go. What do you think about it? Exactly that. It's
Yes.
exactly that, right? Yeah. And so that's how I did it. And look, and some people didn't like the fact that I made 20,642,000 in 42 months, which was interesting because some countries like America and the Chinese loved it, wanted to know what was the formula and how did I do it, right? So I was booked out for years saying people want to know what's the skill that he's got that no one else has got that he can make more money off a stage, and people love me to death, right? But there are other countries who go, oh, that's bad. You made so much money, and money's evil. And some countries have a problem with people making money.
Yes, and I mean, if you look at what's happening in today's climate with, these are the same governments that are labeling somebody like Julian Assange as a terrorist.
Yes.
Or labeling John Snowden as a criminal
Well,
conspiracist.
what worries me about that whole terrorism thing, once you've got that label terrorist to anything, now you've got the camel's nose under the tent because now you're an intellectual terrorist. Because there's new legislation in the world that says once it's called terrorism, all these different rules, all your private liberties disappear because you're a terrorist. Yes. But now you become an economic terrorist, right? A literal terrorist. This terrorist. Everybody can become a terrorist, right? Yes. And you can start dragging that name and applying everything to terrorism. There was something the other day, like someone stabbed a few people, right? In a shopping mall, which probably has been going on for 100 years. But now it was a terrorist act. Well, all of a sudden, the rules don't apply. The guy can be kept in jail for months, no civil liberties. Just what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you can really start changing the definition of words. And that terrorism is just one of those scary things that one day we're all terrorists, right?
Yeah, I mean, next thing you know, not agreeing to gay rights and whatnot is terrorism too, and so forth. So it's a question of like, okay, so at what stage does too much control for the government be, where is that line where it's, a little bit of freedom, but not.
Do you know what? And it's a really hard one because we've all got different perceptions on it. But I tell you what I think is very interesting. Before the pandemic, I reckon you could say, generally speaking, most people believed that whatever the government said was true. Then we've seen the pandemic. Half the world's watched their businesses just get destroyed. People have seen the pharmaceutical companies influence governments, back money, all this sort of stuff's going out. And people have sat back. Now this whole disaster's gone with all these people who have just had their lives destroyed with a death rate that's up about 12.25% of what it was prior to the pandemic because of all these jabs and stabs and all the other stuff we've had.
Careful, censor.
Can't really say what you say, can't say right off. All that little polish that you put on your arm. And the thing is, so people now, I think, are different. People now question government.
Correct.
So when government says, this is good for you, people are more sceptical now to say, really? What's the other side of the story? Which they might not have done before.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, in knowing that, though, in today's climate, everything's online.
Yes.
There is this sort of skepticism and pessimism all across the board.
Yeah.
About what is truth, what is the real facts.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in this kind of environment, what do you think are some of the most important either it's skills or experiences or things that people should be equipping themselves with to face what's coming and what's already here, and sort of not just survive but actually thrive.
Well, okay, so first of all, there's a few things here. But I want to get to Randolph Hearst, who was famous. And Randolph Hearst, they made a movie around him in 1942 called Citizen Kane. And he was the #1 newspaper guy who virtually owned the media, right, in the United States. And I'll tell you this story because of something he just said. And one of his employees said to him, Randolph, we've got to print the paper. What do we want to get the American people to believe at this point in time? He said, the American people will believe what I tell them they're going to believe. And that's the power of the media, right? Because people always believe media, and that's why a media will push a country into a recession, bring it out. So what normally happens is the media starts talking down the economy, then the economy reads the media, goes down, straight economics, and then when it's time that we're all having a terrible time, the media will talk up the economy, and we all start feeling better about ourselves, and it goes back up, right? What we're going to accept the fact that everybody's got an opinion. Now, here's what's interesting. Out of 100% of people, because I had to learn this when I sold life insurance back in the day, out of 100% of people, let's know the statistics, like 1 will be rich, 4 will be independently wealthy, 27 will be dead, and the rest of whatever's left will own half a house and still be barely working to make some money, right? So basically everybody, 94% make nothing. Only 6% make anything. Do you understand? So first thing is this. If we know that, and that 94% of the people become losers, only 6% become winners, don't start getting your advice from a loser on how to be a winner. So most people go to the wrong place to get the advice. They go and get the advice from their friends or these people. And usually you'll find those people never make anything. So why would you go and get advice from those guys on how to be a winner? Like, we all get this. I've started this. You've got to love this. People all the time are coming on the internet and going, do you want to invest in this and invest in that? And I always say the same thing. Oh, that sounds great. Have you made millions? Oh, have I made millions? Fad. And they've always got to how much millions have made. So great. Do me a favour. Could you just send me over your bank statement? Just photograph it with your camera. Send that over to me and I'm ready to go. Now, how many people do you think have ever sent me over a photograph of their bank statement? Never happens. But
only the serious ones.
Yeah, but it brings a conversation to rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, and everything's half truth. So it's that veiled thing between marketing and it's everybody's going to have an opinion. And I would say that one of the best things that I rely on to muddle through, knowing how there's so much information, is people always go word of mouth. Who do you know who's a good this? Who do you know who's a good this? There's 50 guys can advertise for being a plumber, okay? They'll all advertise being a plumber. But you and I won't know any of them. You'll still say to your best friend, do you know a good plumber? Yeah, Harry Jones, right? You'll always call Harry Jones regardless of how good those 50 advertisements are. Do you understand? Because word of mouth will always be the best marketing you'll ever do.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, like, for example, here in the Indonesian markets where we're built on crypto and you know, that sort of industry. And one of the things that we always remind to our viewers is, you know, whenever you see an influencer that looks like they know what they're talking about and trying to give you advice in crypto, it's like, you know, look at their portfolio. Like, do they actually walk the talk? Do they actually have, you know, millions in crypto that they're managing? And if they don't, then they're just a guy yapping, telling you to buy or sell, or you know, and they don't really know what they're talking about. So here's the thing I solved. Here's what most people do. Most people will fill the internet full of crap to convince you how good they are, right? Here's 50 ways to do this, here's 50 ways to do crypto, here's 60 ways to do that. Now, here's what people don't get. We end up with what's called clutter. The brain can only take in 1,500 messages a day, and that's what it takes in every day. So your brain has to sort through 1,500 messages to pick out something that's great, okay? So everybody who's a guru, influencer, or whatever, right, is all putting out this stuff on the internet, okay? I stripped all my stuff. Now, I've got 30 years worth of stuff, right? I stripped it all off the internet. You can only find one thing about Rick Otten on the internet. That's it. And it boils down to the fact that it doesn't matter. Whatever you are selling to anybody on the internet, you're selling two things. You're selling trust and results. That's all people are buying. When they read all your marketing and all your skills and everything you've done and your great-grandmother, they want to know one thing. Can I trust you, and will I get the results? Now, if we boil down to that, everything about Rick Otten, when people type that in, besides the fact that I'm not a very good author,
the fact is, you're only going to find one thing, and that is all the people who have made money doing my strategies, right? So I took on this hundreds of them, right? And that's all you go on all these YouTube sites and Flickrs and all the letters. All you actually find anywhere on the internet is all the people who made money from me. Now, it doesn't say how they did make money because it's not relevant. Because all people want to do is buy trust and results. They go, oh my God, these people, look at all these results. There's just pages of them. No one else has this many results. Well, heck, they trusted him. So, because that's all you're selling. Do you understand? Now, it's also very easy for the brain to then make a decision, move with this guy or move with this guy. But so if they're the only thing you're selling, you can forget all the other crap you put on the internet. Because people don't believe it anyway. They're going to be skeptical.
That's an interesting take that you put, because the way I put it to my audience is, so I coach students on doing consultancy businesses and being a digital marketer. And one of the things I tell them is very similar to what you said, but I say it differently. It's not trust and results. I say it's confidence that you're selling. Confidence that you can deliver the thing that you say you'll deliver, that you can get the results, and that you can be trusted and so forth.
Because people are going to buy into the perception that you know what you're doing. Because here's the interesting thing. I don't know about crypto. I've told you, everybody, I don't know about crypto. What I want to believe in is that you know about crypto. So there's another thing that says, I don't want to know what Brian knows. I just want to know Brian. So we have to accept the fact that people have to have confidence that you know what you're doing. Do you understand? It's a little bit like when you go to hospital. The guy's going to give you a bypass surgery, okay? You're lying on the table. You don't know how it works. You just got to have confidence that he knows how it works. Now, if he walks over to the stethoscope, picks it up, goes, oh, what's this? Never seen this before. What how it works? You're probably going to jump off the table and run out, right?
Correct.
So that whole thing about confidence is people, when they buy into people, they're buying into, if they're confident about something. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, because if you're not confident, other people can sense it and they'll smell it and you go nowhere quickly.
How do you get across? In your case, you've already got a reputation of your own and so forth. But for somebody who's just starting out, nobody knows who the hell they are. Nobody's
okay. So here's how you start out. It's real simple. At the bottom, you can't start at the top. When I started out, I spoke to 9 people. Here's how it started. I was doing. Wasn't using much money to do it, right? And this little group of people, they asked me if I'd come and speak. I spoke to 9. The next week it was like 15 turned up. The next minute it was like 35. Then it was 50. The next minute it's like 5,000, right? And each time you went along, the thing just grew and you just developed. And there's 2 things. Always try to be a niche, like don't try to be everything to everybody, because that creates the forest in people's minds. They want to pull out a tree. So I'm only very, very niche in what I do. Do you understand? I don't do all these different things. I just do that. And I agree, I don't know how to do that. I just do this, right? So you've got to give people, the audience, a place that what you stand for. What's the stamp, right? And the second thing is, mate, what I think is always interesting is you'll get a 25-year-old kid, right? He goes, let me tell you how to buy multi-million-dollar countries and you're thinking, son, you're 25. Like, do you know what I mean? So sometimes it just takes time in the trenches. I had someone just the other day called me up from the US actually and said, look, they're trying to buy from the Indonesian government. And it's like 30 million US dollars, right? And they were trying to tell me how they could do it. I said, well, how are you going to get the $30 million? And they started telling me all the different ways they're going to try and fund it to pay off the Indonesian government. Well, the right questions, which were kind of like, well, is this debt owed by it was all debt, right? And I'm like, rather than trying to find money to pay off the Indonesian debt, why don't you just promise the Indonesian government a profit on what you're going to make, keep their debt, use their debt as a facility, go and make all your money. Now you've got nothing in the transaction. When you make 10 million, give an extra $1 million to the government, you just made 9 million with nothing in the deal, right? But you don't learn that when you're 25. Do you understand? So when you're starting out, I really hate to say it, but what I reckon you could do is you absorb as much as you can from reading stuff, because everybody does a little bit, and you pull a little bit of everybody, right? Pull a little bit of everybody. And then there was a point of difference that I learned when I worked with a guy called Alan Pease back in 1979. I've never changed it.
Yep.
Right? People want to be told, if you want to get a positioning statement, right? People want to be educated, but they also want to be entertained. So whatever you can do it in an entertaining fashion, right? Backed by science with stories. So be entertaining, back it with science, story. So there used to be, I remember when Alan taught me this many years ago, and he'd go and talk. You can go to a comedy store and you can tell jokes and get $50, right? You can walk on a stage, tell jokes the whole time and give people 3 good reasons for coming, 3 golden nuggets, they'll pay you $5,000. But you're still a comedian on stage, right? And I remember once, I think a judge said to me, they said, Mr. As far as I'm concerned, all you do is put on a show. I said, no, Your Honour, I'll put on a show by which people learn, right? And that was the craft. Do you understand? So you've got to have a point of difference, because at the end of the day, if there's 20 people and they're all the same, Brian, who are you going to pick?
Yeah, that's a good question. The most entertaining one, I guess.
Well, the one you resonate with,
right?
Sure. The one you resonate with. And I remember I don't always get it right. I remember once a woman stood up in the middle of my event, it was probably 15, 20 years ago. And she said, I'm not happy. She said, why not? She said, because all you tell is jokes. Well, if I told funnier jokes, would you be happier? Because it's like, so you've just got to have a point of difference, because at the end of the day, everybody's now on the internet that wasn't there before. The pandemic shifted everybody onto the internet. And if there's one thing, Brian, I can say to you this. I'm like everybody else, trolling through all these people. And I recently had a business coach who teaches people, right? And they go, what you do differently? And I said, look, I tell you what, you've got 1,000 business coaches. Tell me, what do you got here that makes you any different from anybody else? You've got to have a point of difference. Do you understand? Find out your point of difference, because that's the bit that will resonate with people and it'll stick out. And also, whatever your personality is, don't change it. Like, I talk fast. I'm a bit of a maverick. I sometimes get myself into trouble, right? I think funny. My brain thinks funny. It's just how it is. And I remember once, really, 30 years ago, where the ABC television did a documentary on me, and the producer said one thing, he said, whatever you do, do not change your personality of who you are. Because most people go, oh, I should wear a 3-piece suit, and I should be speaking deeper, and I should be just like this guy, this guy, this guy. What happens is you become like that guy. And let me tell you, the biggest lesson I learned in business, well, I've learned lots of lessons. I used to put on these shows when they were packed out. I used to do 3 or 4 or 5 a year. And they were extremely great. But, I used to come in with wigs, and I'd dress up as a pig, and I'd fly. I'd do oddball stuff, right? And people would turn up with little propellers on their heads. And it was a show. It was literally a show by which people learn, right? As we got bigger and we got more international and there was more money involved, here's where people screw it up, because I did too. All the professionals come and go, ooh, you shouldn't be doing that joke anymore. That's going to upset the Arabs. Ooh. And I think I used to do a thing about the silent, what's it called? The power of silence in Egypt, right? And I think you probably saw that video, right? When I started negotiating something for $6,000, it became $1, and I said nothing in 4.5 minutes, right? But I just used the body language for the drop. And I used to play that, and they'd say, oh, you can't put that, because now you're putting down Egyptian people. Oh, you can't do that joke. So what happened, bit by bit, every part of the personality of that show was taken out to make corporate happy, okay? So we're done to that, because everything was it's like, got to get a bit more professional. You've got to stop doing this, got to stop doing that. What happened is we became so squeaky clean and politically correct, I lost the tribe. I just became the same as everybody else, and the thing fell apart. And I didn't realise it until later, but the craziness that it was the bit that was different from everybody else that made everybody else come. Do you know what I'm saying? And when we got it business correct, right? I mean, I learned a lot about business over the years, to all these guys who charge $200,000 a year because they're a business consultant. I'm thinking to myself, how many businesses have you run? Because it became self-evident. Something you said earlier, right? Half these business consultants have never run a business, let alone a multi-million-dollar business, which mine was worth a fortune. And they're going, oh, I can't do that, can't do that. Offend. Well, I do offend. I offend everybody, right? I'm probably offending half the people right now going, oh, I can't watch that man. So, and then you become so squeaky clean. What you got to do is do this. Accept the fact that half the world will love you and half the world will hate you. Do you understand? Right? Now, as you know, I wrote a book once, right? As a result of that, half the world loved me for it, half the world hated me, right? So you can't be everything to all people. And this is where people mistake. They try to be everything to all people instead of accept the fact that these people won't like me, these people won't like me, but I'll be this way and never change who you are. That's the really, really long answer to a very short question.
Thanks for the details. So that being said, though, these days, what are you getting yourself busy with? I mean, what fills up your life and time?
Well, I tell you what, I've done some exciting things, which of course I've got to share with you, right?
Sure.
Okay, so when the pandemic came, I was sitting on a rock. Okay, one of the best things is people always go on a holiday, and if you notice when people go on a holiday, they come back from the holiday and say, while I was away, I had a great idea. People never have their great ideas in their environment. They always have a great idea on the holiday, come back and go, I had a great idea while I was away. Here's why. Because when you move away from steel and cement and you go towards nature, whether that's mountains or water, the bit about nature is it changes the oscillation rates of the rhythms of the biorhythms of the brain, which brings it down from about 75,000 hertz down to about 35,000. We're not going to get into that right now. But what it means is it opens the flood doors for new thinking that normally can't come in an environment which is all just steel and cement in this, right? So anyway, I went away, sat on a beach for a while. And then I realised with the pandemic, a couple of exciting things happened, right? Because we're all worried about not wearing our mask and infecting the whole planet, we're all going to die. One of the things that happened, all the courts and the legal system around the world went digital. Courts went digital. Paper, everything went digital to protect everybody, right? So I had this thought. I thought, what if, okay, give you an example. Just say someone today owes you $10,000 and they decide they're not going to pay you, right? Could you agree that you've got to go to a lawyer, spend a whole bucket load of money, go through some sort of court legal process to try to get your money back?
Sure, that's reasonable.
That's reasonable. And is it therefore, do you think there are some people who know that and therefore just have no intention of paying you because they know that it's going to be so expensive for you to go through the process, they're just going to go, what the hell?
Yeah. Okay. I think the cost adds up to, back in the day when I was active, it was like $30,000.
I get it.
Legal fees just to get somebody to
Okay,
pay.
so here's the deal.
Right.
So I created this system called Pay Me, right? It's just beautiful. What I decided to do, I said, what if I could put this whole process on an app? Hey, how Pay Me works. You put in who owes you money. Brian owes me money. What does it owe me money for? Blah, 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 blah. What for? Blah, blah, blah. As I put your details, everything about you pops up it's already there. It pops up on Pay Me, everything about you, right? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. How much does he owe me? He owes me $10,000, blah, blah. Okay. Push the button for the court costs. I hit the button on the app. The APIs talk directly digitally to the court. Pops up, says it's $42.57 for court fees to sue you. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. I've bypassed the entire legal profession. I then put the credit card in, I pay the $42. This now talks to the court, right, and delivers all the forms to sue you. Do you understand? Right? Mm-hmm. With the Pay Me registration numbers on it, everything. So you get a thing basically saying you're being sued by for $10,500. It's only costing $42 to do it, right? And here's your reference number to Pay Me, and you can download the Pay Me app and pay the bill. Now, when you pay me the bill, because I've now got my money, right, Pay Me, which is me because I own the app, gets 10%. 90% of what I get goes back into your bank account, right? I keep 10% because you use my app, and it only costs you $42 instead of $30,000.
What a great idea that is.
Isn't it? Awesome.
But I can imagine that would piss off a lot of legal people.
Well, it's really fun. Let me tell you funny. Well, I thought that too, but here's what happened. When we built the whole thing, and I was in the process of putting it into the app stores, right? And some legal firm sat me down. They said, do you really want to do that? Or would you rather us just pay you $800 a month licensing fee? We'll still charge the clients $5,000 or $10,000 in legal fees, but they're not going to know that we're using Pay Me. So we'll use a corporate issue of Pay Me at $800 per month per legal firm. They'll still charge you $5,000 or $10,000, but before they had paralegals and all this stuff, they don't. They just use the Pay Me app. Do you understand? Mm. So I used Pay Me and moved it as a tool for legal firms because it made more money, because legal firms use it every day, as against you might use it once.
Sure.
Right? So I just set up the market on it differently. So I did Pay Me. And then I got into something else. Then I got into because I was in the business, right? And it's really funny when you sit on this rock. It became a pretty big rock, okay? So do you remember how much you used to go, like any sort of legal agreement, right? I used to do house agreements, right? But I did them in England, US, Australia, around the world. I was doing these house agreements, right? Especially ones in Greece, because I couldn't read any of it. And Greek legal agreements. And so you'll love this, right? So with Web AI, what you do is wherever you stand, let's say, like I want to buy a right? As we type in I'm buying, blah, 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 and I'll put in your postcode, the phone now talks to the local court and pulls up all the legal forms relevant to this transaction and puts them in the phone. Pack it, they're right there. Don't need a lawyer, right? And then with your thumbprint, you sign your documents, if all done, they go, there you go, all your legal docs are done. And so with AI, where you go through different states of America, England, and Australia, you don't need to use lawyers and stuff. You can just do it all on your phone. So apps and the internet, and if there's one thing I read is so true, because I've got Dine for $1, which I don't know if you want to hear about. But
what's that?
Oh, that's awesome. But what happens is, if people understand this, think of a problem, okay? You can then create an app that solves it. I wanted to solve the problem of the fact that people don't pay bills because they know you're not going to chase them for the money. And once you put on an app for $42, everybody starts paying you what they owe you. Because remember, if you don't pay me, I've got judgment. You get bankruptcy. I go take your goods and possessions all for $42. You with me? So that's just revolutionised the world. Okay, you're going to love this one. Dine for $1. I was going to bring this out a few years ago. And I've had it in the back of my mind, except I brought out a book called and it didn't go down too well. And so at the time, people said to me, don't bring out Dine for $1. It's just not going to be good timing. So here's how Dine for $1 works, right? It's actually happening as we're talking. Like, what do you think? Right now we've got restaurants all around the world, okay? But they're being absolutely hammered, Brian. They're making no money. You know why? Uber Eats. Uber Eats has come in, delivery services, Deliveroo, Uber Eats, whatever they call it, but they're taking 20, 25, 30% of the restaurant's profits. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So the restaurants can't make money, right? And also no one's going to the restaurants anymore because they're staying at home and just ordering the restaurant food. Okay? Yep. So it's a real problem for the industry, a real problem. Restaurants is killing restaurants. Here's how Dine for $1 works. So let's say, let's just say the population of, say Australia is about 26 million, right? If you could eat in your favourite restaurant, it cost you $1 instead of $100.
Sure.
Do you reckon you'd be interested?
Of course.
Okay. Out of 26 million people, if they could eat in a restaurant for $1, do you reckon out of the 26 million, how many people do you think would be interested?
I think a high percentage of them.
Out of 26 million, how many?
If everybody knew about it, 90%?
90%. So let's say 20 million.
Sure.
Right? 20 million. So those 20 million, they've got to download the Dine for $1 app, right? Dine for $1 app is $1. Do you reckon those 20 million people would download the Dine for $1 app for $1 so they could eat for $1?
Of course.
Okay, so let me ask you something. 20 million people download the app for $1. How much money have I made so far?
20 million.
How many meals have I cooked?
So far, 0.
Okay, good. Okay, so now you've downloaded that and 20 million people are all trying to eat at their favourite restaurant. And yeah, you can. Booked. You're in there for $1. The only problem is you're not in there till next February.
Yeah, it's booked out all the time.
You bet. It's booked out 7 days a week. Now, you've got to remember, this is why it's so profitable for the restaurants. They're now booked out 7 days a week instead of only 3. Do you understand? So all their staff costs and overheads can be spread out over 7 days instead of just making money on 3. So now you can't eat till February. Well, let me ask you something. What if I could feed you faster? So I've got like a feed you faster button on there, right? Feed you faster. It's like a little slider on the app, right? Now, as I feed you faster, the date that you're getting fed starts coming forward. Do you understand? So you can bring it from next February to December, August. Do you understand? Do you think there'd be some people who would want to be fed faster than waiting till next February?
Of course.
Correct. Okay. So as you slide that little thing, it adds another $1, $2, $3. It starts billing your credit card. Okay. So you might be now eating in, say, August, but to bring you back 4 or 5 months, it's now $5. Do you understand? So what percentage of people do you think might want to use the Feed Me Faster button to get fed quicker rather than wait till February?
I wouldn't know.
Have a guess.
10%.
10%. So that's 2 billion people who have paid $5 to get fed faster, right? So 2 billion people have paid. Is that about 10 million?
I think it's so.
10 million plus the other 20 million. I've made 30 million. How many meals have I served so far?
In August. Quite a lot.
Yeah, but how many have I served so far?
So far, 0.
Huh? None.
None.
Zero. Okay. Let me ask you something. What percentage of people do you think won't turn up to that restaurant in August?
Because they forget.
They forget. What percentage?
Well, if I take it from experience in my own events, even though people pay for the actual ticket,
Yeah.
I'd say about 30% don't even show up.
Okay, 30% don't show up. The restaurants know that. In actual fact, you know what restaurants do right now?
Yep.
They charge you like $5 on your credit card or something, right? But we know that 30% don't show. Even though you put in $5 and they say, look, I'm going to bill your credit card for $5. If you show up, that's okay. You don't get billed. But if you don't bill, you're going to get $5 because someone else who's dined for $1 missed out. Do you understand? So we've got 30%. So that's 6 million people, right? 6 million times 5, that's 100 and is that 6 million people by 5? How much is that, Brian?
30 million.
30 million. So I'm at 60 million I've made so far. How many meals have I served?
0.
Okay. So I had 60 million. Now you turn up at the restaurant. How many people are going to go to a 5-star restaurant and sit there on a Saturday night by themselves?
I would, but I'm not sure most people would.
No, I don't think most people would either. Yeah. So therefore, you'll probably bring your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. It doesn't matter, but you'll come with someone else. Huh?
And that's at full price? Or?
Full price. They're paying full price. So here's the deal. You're getting fed for $1. They're paying full price. I'm not getting you drunk. So if you want to buy a bottle of wine, you can do that. The profit margin on a bottle of wine, do you know what percentage of the profit?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's by 400%.
Yeah.
So the money's made on the wine. It's not made on the food, right? So here's what's happened. The restaurant's giving you your meal for $1. The other person's paid full freight, but they made all the profit on the bottle of wine that you bought anyway at $80. Do you understand? We've now done, that thing's now full 7 days a week, and there'll be two sets, one at 6:30 to 8:30. Okay? The profits for that restaurant are through the absolute roof, right? How much have I made?
I don't know. You haven't told us yet.
About 60 million bucks.
About 60 million. Okay.
Because I don't serve the meals, the restaurants do.
Sure.
But they only serve it to you. Oh, by the way.
But then why would the restaurants want to, sign up for a $1 dine?
Because they can do two things. They don't have to. They can either have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or they can have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, right.
But if you do the economics of being in the restaurant business, any restaurant would rather be full 7 days a week rather than being full 3 days a week. And they don't actually lose money. So when you take out the $1 for the one person, they make the money on the full freight. As a couple, they don't lose money.
Sure.
So anyway, coming back from that, and then I've got, and then I realised there's a bigger shift. That's what I'm doing now, right? Which is exciting. Have you ever heard of this thing called the New West?
What's that?
The New West. Well, this is like everybody's piling out of the Western countries.
Is that cowboys slinging guns and?
Yeah, it's no. Everybody's moving out of the Western countries into the Eastern countries, right?
Sure.
Or as I affectionately call it, the New West, right? And this migration is massive. As people are looking for better quality of life, they're starting to move. Except there's one thing that the Eastern countries don't have. They don't have finance available for property. You've always had to pay cash.
That's true. That's true.
So here's my question. Reminds me when I was in Dallas, Texas, back there in '89, right? And then all the finance disappeared, and all the house prices went from 80 grand down to 8 grand because the finance wasn't there. When the finance came back, they went back up to 80 grand. If you put finance into these countries where there is no finance, do you think the values of real estate would go up?
Of course they would.
Yeah, of course. So my pet thing right now is bringing finance into the East to make it easier for people to move from the West.
So would you like to elaborate on how that works?
Okay, so here's the deal. Right now you've got to try and buy, let's just talk this country, right? You're going to pay $300,000 or $400,000 for a piece of real estate. You've got to pay cash. But the interesting thing is only 3.5% of the world has that sort of cash. So if you look at everybody's bank statement, only about 3.5% has that sort of cash. You understand?
I'm actually surprised it's 3.5%. I thought it'd be like 1%.
Yeah, but if I said 1%, someone's going to argue and put a comment section going, nah, I spoke to my other unemployed brother-in-law with one tooth who said there's 3%. So I'll just go with 3.5%, okay?
Sure.
Covers off for anybody. So here's the deal. Once you go from 3.5%, you bring finance in where people can put down 20%, right? Now 80% of the planet can buy. Do you understand? So you've gone from only 3.5% buying to 80% buying. Now, when you've got the hungry herd who can now all buy, what do you think happens to the value of those properties that they want to buy?
Of course they go up.
Goes through the roof. Yeah, correct. So all I've done is designed structures and processes by which people in the East can now use financing and get money to buy the properties. Do you understand? Yeah.
Nice.
And so now people can come in, and I just did one the other day. I mean, this is not going to stay, but like I just did one the other day. Brand new stuff. The stuff I'm actually calling the building. I don't know if you've ever been to the Greek islands. Santorini is this island, right?
The one with the white buildings.
Santorini. So I've called it Santorini of Bali. Bali Santorini, because we've just designed it. Looks the same, right? Uluwatu. And all the stuff is all carved out. Looks like Santorini. So here's the deal. You rent these puppies for about $285, right? You come in, you put down about 35%. Well, 35% is about 80 grand or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the interesting thing. Once you pay the deposit, you never pay any more money. That's it. Because the rents are so strong that it covers the balance of those payments just under 4 years. 42, it's a bit less than that. It's about 40 months or something, right? Mm. So here's the deal. So you put down the deposit, never pay any more money. The thing's totally paid off in the balance of about 40 months. Over the next 20 years, just imagine the amount of income that investor now makes because there's no expenses. It's already paid off. Mm. So in the West, we have a loan that goes for 25 years. You pay it for 25 years. Here, you might have a property for 25 years, but the loan only finishes at 4. Mm. You got 21 years of making money instead of 21 years of spending money. Do you understand?
Yep.
So now these things actually become what I call ATM property machines. Now, this will change because as the West starts to pour in, like they are now, like the hungry herd, and they're going to push up the values of properties very fast, these returns will start to diminish very quickly. But now it's the land of milk and honey, golds all over the road. I remember when I came here for 4 days, saw so much gold lying on the road, thought I'd have to move in, right? And this will change now because those properties at 285 will eventually be 600, 700, $1 million, do you know what I'm saying? But right now, because there's never been financing in the East at all, you've still got these, like it was in Dallas, Texas, the property prices are here, but as all these people now pour in, taking advantage of the finance, it just goes up.
Sure.
So it's just being a part of that. That's exciting.
I think it's a really, really good decision in terms of, right market.
Well, you see, because I got like Bali property finance, then I was going to have like Thailand property finance, and Vietnam property finance, and Cambodia property finance, and then Laos. Because once you've got the systems, the process, and the formulas, all you can do is cut and paste, right?
Now, why did you choose those countries of all the countries you could have chosen?
Okay, because they're all the countries that the people are moving into and there is no finance. So, for instance, the biggest powerhouse in Asia now, unbelievable, is Vietnam. It's the most powerful country per head of population than just about anybody, which is funny because we all fought the Vietnam War in the 70s thinking the communists will take over and there'll be no money, yet they're the most entrepreneurial country that's out there. So you've got to be there. Thailand's become an absolute powerhouse because they're taking all the industry out of China. Is moving into all your refrigerators. It all comes out of Thailand and the cars stuff. Plus, it's interesting. I've just been reading the economic reports at the G20 summit. Indonesia's now announced they're going to be the 4th largest economy by 2045. Right? They're planning on being the 4th largest economy in the world by 2045. I mean, that's just fantastic, right? Because the changes that they're going to make now, these countries are becoming powerhouses. So you want to be there. Now, Cambodia, why Cambodia? It's stuck between these two countries, right? You've got the Titans, right? You've got Vietnam here, and you've got Thailand here, and you've got Cambodia down here. Well, it can't stay there. Do you understand? It's going to just get sucked up by the two on either side. Laos a bit further down the road because the government's a bit crippled, but it'll get there eventually as all the weird governments around the place disappear.
Sure.
So I'd say probably every second American who ever calls me, there's an old expression that says the only money that an American has is next week's paycheck. So they all live on credit, right? And every second says, well, what's the financing arrangements to buy property in Bali? Well, where there hasn't been any, you can hear the click at the other end of the phone. Well, now that you can say, look, you can escape those 44% taxes and escape all those other social issues and problems and get massive returns on property and finance.
Thing. I've been living in Australia for most of my life, and then I spent.
You even look Australian.
Do I really? But moving outside of Australia, I see first of all from an income perspective. Since I don't live in Australia for the last 10 years, I'm non-tax resident in Australia.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And over here in Indonesia, I think the tax rate is 0.5%.
That's pretty low.
Yes.
Yeah, lower than a snake's belly.
So it's extremely, extremely low. And, I think one of the key benefits of having traveled mostly through Asia is to actually see how the local people see the Western world. And, you know, so the West, the narrative says, you know, Israel is your friend, Palestine deserve to die.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, jab is good for you,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. But when you see it from the East, you know, these Asian countries, they're fully awake. You know, they absolutely know what's really going on.
You know, propaganda was always called propaganda until 1917, where Woodrow Wilson came back from Europe. And they changed that name propaganda to public relations.
I think it was Edward Bernays, actually.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes.
He was with him, with Wilson, and he was the guy that changed it and said, let's not call it propaganda anymore.
Yes.
We'll change this to public relations,
Yes.
right? Which is new word for propaganda. And the point is, the narrative that most of us get is, if you're in a Western country, it's from the West, which is controlled by the government. The governments get the media in a room and say, here's the story we want to tell, and that's the story that's told. Now, when you get outside that, the story is very different. But here's what's interesting. You just touched on the fact that Indonesian tax is like half of 1% or something crazy.
0.5%
right?
up to 480,000.
There you go. So a lot of these Asian countries are the same, right? But you know what? You can't go into a Western country and tell people that, because the penalties are massive.
Oh, really?
Yes, the West is struggling to, well, all their banks are broke because they all bought derivatives, so they've got no money in there. And the sucking sound now of the nomads and what's called the early adapters, right? Early adapters did two things. They brought electric cars and moved out of the West, right? Well, they're starting to make a heck of a lot more money, and people are starting to look at that going, hello, what are we missing out on, right? So there's a massive sucking sound. In actual fact, I think that person told me the other day that if you want to take money out of Australia and invest it in Asia, you've got to go for an appointment with a bank manager to get permission to do so. That's your own money in your own bank, right?
Insane.
Yeah.
I am aware that I am aware that they're stopping people from buying crypto, at least. I mean, the Commonwealth Bank, I don't know if you can find the article, but Commonwealth Bank, they set a policy that you could only buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin every month, regardless of how much you have saved up in your bank.
Yeah, correct.
And I think one of the key reasons is exactly what you're saying. If too many people realize that there's alternatives to just holding dollars and whatnot, there'll be a flood of money coming out.
Correct. Now, one of the things I won't do on a public facade like this, I mean, do I know a lot about what things are? Yeah, but I won't, because I'm in a public forum, but I'd never go on a stage and I'd never talk about the different tax rates around the world as to what Australia charges or England charges, whatever, because this can be seen to be, in the eyes of, say, those governments, promoting tax avoidance.
Okay, so
which I'd never want to be seen as promoting tax avoidance. So it's one of those things where the West tells a story to its people, and that's okay, but the East just had a different story, what I call the New West, right? But just a lot of people are just going, you know what? You know, it was interesting. I was on a train in Thailand the other day, and all the trains were electronic. There's no driver, right? They come every 3 minutes. They're never late, right? Never any graffiti, never any crime. And because we're a Buddhist country, if you left your handbag on the seat and came back an hour later, it's still sitting there.
Yes.
It's still sitting there because Buddhists don't steal. Right?
Yes.
And it's like, now you're coming from the West and you're trying to get your head around that. Do you understand? So there's a lot of things, and there's always going to be the pros and cons for all different countries. But what we're seeing is, I think we're just seeing a worldwide power shift. You know, we go back to the 1500s, I think, like, if I remember this, the Portuguese had it, then the Spanish had it, then the Dutch had it, then the French had it, then the English had it, then the Americans had it. But that's crumbling, and I think the next powerhouse will be somewhere in the East.
Yep, sure.
Right?
So I think it's this is my take on that, is that it's also age relevant in the sense that, you know, we obviously have quite a few years between us.
Yeah, I mean, I just would have thought you were younger than me, but surprised you're not.
Yeah, but I think Asia's definitely got the spotlight, at least for the next decade or two. However, I do think in between 15 to 40 years from now, I actually think it's Africa. And the reason I say that is because at least, you know, this is my view of the world. I try to keep it in a data-centric way, meaning I look at the data and the statistics. Birth rates, I think, is one of the key ones to determining how big an economy grows. Yeah. One of the reasons why I moved to Indonesia 10 years ago and did business here is because I saw those 270 million Indonesians, 70% of them were 30 years or under. Yeah. And that's the perfect productive age. Right?
You know, it's funny you say that because I was just doing the research on this, and what people don't understand, the world's split into two. You have countries which are mainly under 35 or older 35, right? Yep. Now, if you think of a triangle like this, the country is mainly under 35, has all the big base of people, and a few here, right?
Yep.
The West is inverted.
Correct.
So you've now got all the people as old people over 35 and very few people down the bottom. Well, guess what? The consumer people, there's very few of them in the West to pay for the old people. Do you understand?
It's not just the West. It's Japan. It's China.
China. Oh, yeah. So you've got these. You don't have enough population of young people, and the young people, the consumers that spend, develop, and the other thing is too, most entrepreneurs are under 35.
Correct.
You don't find many 65-year-old entrepreneurs. You're just lucky that I'm still around.
Exactly. I was just about to say, you're the oddball in the room.
Most entrepreneurs are young. If you think about Microsoft, Apple, anything we know was all done by a young entrepreneur who might be older now, but it's the way they think, right? There's a whole reasoning for that, how their head takes in information.
Correct.
And that's where you've got to look at these now. Indonesian population, it's a super young population. Apple's just bringing in their 4th university. They're building their 4th technical university in Bali at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they're creating scientists, right? So they've got 3 already. They're building a 4th one. They were in here. Tim Cook was in here the other day to agree with the Indonesian government. They're building a 4th one because they've got so much tech smart people in their 20s here that are great for the next 30 or 40. We're not going to get that in the West. Correct. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
But that's why I was saying, so I agree for this generation, it is here in Asia. The next one is Africa, because if you go to something like ChatGPT, AI, and just Google or search up, give me the births per woman of each country. All the countries with 7 kids, 6 kids, 5 kids per woman, they're in Africa.
Okay, so here's my question.
Sudan, Nigeria.
Why do you think in the West the population birth rate is reducing?
I actually talk about this in quite a lot of detail. It's a multi-factor reason. If you look at countries like, say, China, as an example, it's actually gone through to a cultural problem with a one-child policy.
Yep.
It created an entire generation of people that grew up with no siblings, thought that, hey, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
And so now that they've opened it up and said, you can have as many kids as you want, please pump out kids, they're going, but why?
Yeah, but why? Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons, a cultural shift. One of the other reasons comes straight down to cost of living. To be able to have a kid, people are going, well, is it cheaper to buy? There's a very funny Durex ad, condom, right? It shows a picture of a baby booster chair. It shows a picture of a condom and it goes, baby booster chair, $400, condom, $2. Which one's cheaper? And so, people are going, but I have to work, and this is men and women. We both have to work. We can't have a kid and have all those outgoings and etc. So cost of living's up there amongst the reasons. And what I find is because people are finding having children to be too expensive, they're going, well, let's just have a dog, let's just have a cat. And that's their replacement for my little baby. So I think it's a multi-factor reason.
Okay, so guess what? I've got one other reason that no one ever thinks about.
Yeah.
Right? And that is in the 1980s, we took women from secretaries and nurses and put them into universities, become medical, financial, and legal people, and they became very good at it, right? Yeah. Now, these people now have careers that never really had careers before because they're just nurses and housewives and all this sort of stuff. Well, now you've got a girl who's really highly qualified, who's getting a nice BMW, got her own apartment, got this, and you're saying, by the way, you got to turn around and now have a kid and stop that. They can't because they're now living this lifestyle. Yeah, right? They've got this lifestyle that they don't want to lose and go back and start having kids. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
right?
And I think that's definitely a message that a lot of people like, say, Jordan Peterson or whatnot, they're trying to highlight, it's very difficult for a woman to, it's not just women really, it's humans can't think 20 years ahead, 30 years ahead, 40 years ahead. And so they can't imagine how lonely life is as a 60-year-old, highly skilled, qualified professional, but with no kids, no grandchildren, nobody around you that truly matter. And meanwhile, your friends are all, either already have their kids or they're off on their own way. And so people can't see that far into the future. And so they're attached to what they're, busy with in their own lives today.
Well, we used to say the life insurance industry, the average person can only think 13 months ahead. That's why if you commit suicide, you're within the first 13 months of an insurance policy that doesn't pay because they've decided that the brain can only see into the future 13 months ahead. So that means if you're going to take life insurance, everybody, make sure you commit the suicide on the 14th month, and then the policy will pay. But not within the first 13, right? Crazy, right?
Sure.
So, that's it. And because now people have taken this whole different direction. The women have gotten into this area. They came into this man's domain, right? And men moved over and made space for them, which is great. And now they're enjoying what's there. And the whole now turn around going, oh, listen, you got to go back and do kids and do whatever. It's just not going to happen. So as a result, as you said, a lot of these countries now have just got a declining population.
And it's mostly the established countries. It's actually interesting. Earlier on, you touched on propaganda turning into public relations.
Correct, yeah. With Beniz, who also set up people having bacon and eggs for breakfast. That was his marketing campaign.
Yes.
People never used to have bacon and eggs for breakfast.
He's also the guy that's responsible for making women stand up for themselves. So back in the day when women were still just housewives washing dishes and so forth, they put together a campaign where women would burn torches of freedom. So they'd roll up newspapers, light the edges on fire, hold it up and say, we believe in freedom and blah, blah, blah for women. That was a campaign to get women to smoke cigarettes, because back in the day it was only men that smoked cigarettes, no women would smoke.
Interesting.
And to get them to smoke, they would go, well, why don't we put symbolic newspapers, make it a representation of independence, freedom, standing for women's rights, and so now you have a whole generation of women that like to smoke.
But it also saved GM, because GM found that everybody had a motor car, right? And they wouldn't buy any more motor cars because we had one. Yep. And it was Beniz who came to GM and said, let's turn it into a fashion statement. We'll make it so that people feel they're out of style and out of fashion if they have last year's car. And so he turned the whole automotive industry into a machinery to a fashion statement, where now if you've got a 3-year-old car, well, you've got to get the new one. Right? So, yeah, quite interesting.
But I think that plays in quite well to, this whole... if you're talking about fashion trends, the whole fashion trend of, it's not really a fashion trend, but it makes logical sense to just earn, outside of the typical pathway of being an employee in a 9-to-5, paying your taxes at full 25%, 40% rates. It's just more fashionable now to go to Bali, be a nomad.
Well, being a nomad is kind of becoming a pretty cool thing to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, it's a little bit harder to control people who take that lifestyle. But when that lifestyle of people get influenced by other people living the same lifestyle, it's easier to create a tribe. And the tribe is just, you're starting to hang around people who think the same way, do things the same way. And so it becomes more comfortable to be a nomad. So what happens is they're no longer being called nomads. They'll be calling them early adapters and a whole bunch of other new names that will come out, which have got more favourable marketing, because no one actually wants to be seen as a nomad.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Nomad, right? So you watch. Over the next few years, there'll be some more trendy expressions for people who, I call them lifestyle engineers. Lifestyle engineer. What do you do? I'm a lifestyle engineer. Really? That sounds pretty cool.
So tell me, how does one get into a tribe such as with yourself, or if people want to find out more about you, or get involved?
I'm pretty used to finding on the internet, right? Yeah. It's like people used to go every day. I go to a meeting, people hand out their business cards, right? They go, "Here's my business card," right? Now we all know that everybody's business card ends up in the trash bin anyway.
I haven't had so back in the day, I'd have these little bright pink business cards.
Yeah.
These I haven't had a business card for 15 years or so.
Well, neither have I. So people say, "You got a business card?" I say, "Oh, I'm on the net, Rick, and I'm pretty easy to find." I'm everywhere, right? So I'm not that. I've just found that's the business card, and as you've had the people who I want to speak to be able to track me down, just somehow track me down, find me, right? They maybe, but I have to say, look, I'm on the internet, because you give out websites and stuff, and oh really? Just type in Rick Otten and we're going to go, wow, my God, this guy's everywhere, right? Sure. And then they'll be able to find me, Which makes me think, should I be changing shirts and we do a different subject?
I think let's do that,
Yeah, because we've been on a roll.
I know.
Look at this, man. We've been on a roll. So let me just swap out shirts.
Yeah, let's swap out.
You know what we can talk about?